Well, beloved, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Thank you. You know, Christmas is one of those holidays that has a dual meaning. It is a Christian holiday. It's also a cultural holiday. Even before it was a Christian holiday, it was a pagan holiday. It's always had this dual meaning to it. And we certainly have this kind of cultural view of Christmas and the Nativity and what it was like with the baby Jesus there. And it's kind of best summed up in one of my favorite movie scenes.
Supper's ready! Come on, y'all! Been slaving over this for hours!
Dear Lord baby Jesus, or as our brothers to the south call you, Jesus, we thank you so much for this bountiful harvest of Domino's, KFC, and the always delicious Taco Bell. I just want to take time to say thank you for my family, my two beautiful, handsome, striking sons, Walker and Texas Ranger, or TR as we call him. And of course my red-hot smoking wife, Carly, who's a stone-cold fox. Dear tiny infant Jesus.
Hey, sweetie, Jesus did grow up. You don't always have to call him baby. It's a bit odd and off-putting to pray to a baby.
Well, look, I like the Christmas Jesus best, and I'm saying grace. When you say grace, you can say it to grown-up Jesus or teenage Jesus or bearded Jesus or whoever you want.
You know what I want? I want you to do this grace good so that God will let us win tomorrow.
Dear tiny Jesus, your golden fleece diapers with your tiny little fat balled up fist pawing.
He was a man. He had a beard.
Look, I like the baby version the best. Do you hear me? I win the races and I get the money. Dear 8-pound, 6-ounce, newborn infant Jesus, don't even know a word yet. Just a little infant, so cuddly, but still omnipotent. We just thank you for all the races I've won and $21.2 million. Woo!
Woo!
Woo! Ow!
Love that money.
The reality of the Christmas story as we hear it in the gospel was a little more stark. Middle Eastern refugee parents alone and unable to find a safe place for Mary to have her baby. The original story is less comforting and more confounding. And in the Gospel of John, as we heard in the last reading, we kind of hear the unpacking of what that all means. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. For John, all is created through the Word. And it's that very Word that becomes human in the person of Jesus. This is a unique claim of Christianity. And people of other monotheistic religions never cease to be amazed at what we claim about this, that God became human, that God loved us so much that by his very nature he was compelled to become one of us. God's incarnation in the person of Jesus is a reflection of the overwhelming and impossible compassion of God for every single one of us. John tells us that this compassion of God is a light that cannot be extinguished. No matter how dark things seem, no matter how much of a nightmare we as humans have made the world, God's compassion still shines, and God's dreams for us are still within reach. Mary, of course, is the most prominent bearer of the light in the Nativity story. By being the God-bearer, she brings the light into the world in a real, incarnate way. She stands as the first Christian priest, being the only human being to ever be able to literally say, "This is my body, and this is my blood given for the world." You know, we often talk about Mary, meek and mild, but that kind of comes from centuries of conditioning. She's not really that way in the gospel. When she meets her cousin Elizabeth after becoming pregnant, she sings the Magnificat, which is in some ways the entire gospel in a nutshell. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. He puts forth his arm in strength and scatters the proud-hearted. He casts the mighty from their thrones and raises the lowly. He fills the starving with good things and sends the rich away empty. He has come to the aid of his servant Israel, remembering his mercy, just as he promised to our ancestors, to Abraham, and to Abraham's descendants forever. She's not a demure damsel. She proclaims the radical dream of God for humanity that will be made incarnate in the child that she bears. She bears the light of God that cannot be snuffed out by the powers of evil. And all of humanity are God's children. But John tells us that when we follow Jesus, we become God's children in a very specific way. We become bearers of the light. And those who follow the light have done so in dark times again and again in our history. When the society and church had become corrupt, St. Francis of Assisi pointed towards a simpler life that was more in tune with God's creation. When the Black Plague swept repeatedly throughout England and many people were looking for scapegoats to blame, Julian of Norwich articulated a vision of hope and God's love. When National Socialism swept into power in Germany in the 30s, Dietrich Bonhoeffer spoke out eloquently against hate and anti-Semitism. When African Americans began to organize against the second slavery of the Jim Crow laws, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. set the movement on a path of nonviolence that led to its success. When she saw the extreme poverty and squalor of the slums of Calcutta, Mother Teresa was moved to found a new order to care for those that society had discarded. And when apartheid began to be challenged in South Africa, the Right Reverend Desmond Tutu became the anti-apartheid movement's spiritual leader and moved the nation not only through that, but through the truth and reconciliation movement in the rebuilding that followed. And even today, people bear the light of Christ as they stand against all of the incredible capacity for darkness that humanity can dream of for itself. Beloved, the world can seem dark. It can seem like our lives are meant to be lived in fear. It can seem like the present darkness, whatever we define it as, is one that cannot be overcome. But the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't extinguish the light. Perhaps we need a little Thomas Kincaid to remember that. Perhaps we need Linus Van Pelt to remind us of that. But let us not forget that Christmas is not just for tomorrow. Christ comes into our darkness so that we might be part of the dream of God. Amen.